Okay, good Tvach, everybody. We're up to the Mishnah on Mem Hey Amid Beis. We've just gone through the process of skila. The aid would go ahead and push. The other aid would then go ahead if the person didn't die. They would pick it up, and one would go ahead. The other aid would drop it on it. And we saw that, in fact, no one ever got to stage 3, which was if you didn't die after that, they would pelt you with stones. I guess this stone was enough to cave in the chest. And I beautifully spoke at the Rambam that the Indian of skila was more of nefila. What the difference was, what's the difference if the person falls on the ground or if a stone falls on the person? It seems to be the Indian of nefila. And that's why the midah keneged midah of skila is the being thrown down by a wild animal or being thrown off a roof or a high place, because the whole Indian is one of nefila. That's the Rambam we spoke out. Now, what happens to the body after skila? What happens to the body after skila? So the pasuk says in the pasuk says, you shouldn't leave the body over on the tree. It doesn't say on an eitz. Ki covered tikberenu b'yomahu. You have to bury it that day. Ki kil lesel kim talu. For the person who was Makal Hashem, he was suspended. So there's two inyanim over here. There's one, this Inyan of not leaving out over. There's an Inyan of by not leaving a mace overnight, and it's a mitzvah to bury them. And in fact, this is Nageya us. That's why we do not leave mason overnight, unless there's mitigating circumstances, as we'll see. Kolon Iskalim Nitlan says the Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion everyone who receives skila, is hung. The body, the corpse is hung. The Chachamim Eina Nitla Ella Hamagadef v'Oived Avodah Zara. Only Megadef and some Oived Avodah Zara. So there are quite a few niskalim, many in the Arroyos, Chil Shabbos, but is the only ones that are niskalim are the ones that are Megadef, they bench Hashem, and Oived Avodah Zara. So Rabbi Eliezer says everyone who receives skila is hung. Says the Chacham only 2, even though there are many other niskalim. Again, in the Arroyos venue, Chil Shabbos, nonetheless. Ha'ish toilin Isai panav klape ha'am. The person, when he's suspended, his face is facing the people. V'ha'isha paneha klape ha'etz. And the woman, her face is towards the wood. Rabbi Eliezer, these are words Rabbi Eliezer. B'chacham ha'ish nitla ve'ena isha nitlis. The woman is not suspended at all. So 2 machloikasin. Rabbi Eliezer says all niskalim, and a woman is also. And the Chacham say only 2 niskalim, one who benches Hashem and Avodah Zara, and women are not suspended at all. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, we just had that long Rashi we went through that Shimon ben Shetach killed 80 witches, and he suspended them in Ashkelon. You see they're women. So Amar Lo, they told Rabbi Eliezer, Shmoinim Noshim Tala, 80 women he suspended. And we don't judge 2 on the same day. Okay, fellas, outside. Let's put this together. Freg Rabbi Eliezer, you see that you hang women. Enfid the Chacham to Rabbi Eliezer, there's no raya, because Shimon ben Shetach went ahead and killed these women. These women were all witches, but neither in the venue of kishuf, there are many forms, and each one is a different avera. So, for example, there's ov, where you pull up the dead. There's yidoni, where you put a thing in your mouth. There's choy v'chaverim, where you gather animals together, all kinds of dangerous animals together. These will be 3 separate averos, and Bezdin can only judge the same avera this next day, on the same day. They can't judge separate averos. It's too much. They can't do it. So Menmela, the Chachamim answered Rabbi Eliezer beautifully. Your taina is that they went ahead and suspended women, But in fact, they shouldn't have judged them in the first place because they were over different venues of Avodah Zarah. Ella, the fact that they did judge 80 in one day shows that what? That it was Hayrashah. So the fact that they judged them was a Rosh Shah, meaning it was a one-time, for that particular time. And therefore, they were suspended that particular time. But in general, women are never suspended. So your raya from Shimon Mesheta is Mishkan Raya. Let's see a nice Rashi in the Mishnah, guys. Ain't on Mishnayim B'yem Echad, Bezdin Echad. In one Bezdin, you can't judge two the same day. Mishum Tlei Matzi Lafuche B'Schusei, the Kol Chad V'Chad. Since they're different Averos, you can't fight Schusim for each one. So Tzarech Levakesh Rayos L'Misa Zu. Uve Gemara Mefarish, the B'Shtei Averos come. I was speaking about two Averos. The Einro Yisayim Shavis, the Raya is not equal. So again, even though you would think that Kishiv is one Avera, in fact, what fellas, it's multiple Averas. Just quickly, keep your finger on Rashi. Look at the Taisus on Mem Vav Amid Aleph, fellas. The last Taisus on Mem Vav Amid Aleph. Shtei Averos, Umaisa Deshim Ben Shetach, Yesh Bailis Ov, V'Yedoni, V'Yesh Chay V'Chever, V'Shamech Shefais. In other words, so Taisus is pointing out there were multiple Averas. So Memela, it's not possible to have judged them on the same day. But they did. Continues Rashi back by us. Shimon ben Shetach, the time required for it. This time, it was necessary to do something. Because at that time, the Bnei Yisrael, the women of Yisrael, they were busy with witchcraft. They were really busy with it. And therefore, he wanted to make a mark at that time. He wanted to go put a boundary around it that these girls, the women who are involved in this should wise up because this is what's going to happen to them. V'talon, and he hung them up, even though women are not hung. He hung them up to go ahead and publicize it, to stop other women from indulging in witchcraft. V'dones kulam b'yom echad b'fnei kroivehem, and he judged them all the same day because of their kroivim shalei yiskashu latzilan. They didn't have time to come together, perhaps, and save them. Fascinating Rashi with a lot of information. That if you would have gone ahead and okay, you know what? Next week we're judging all the witches. That would have given time for the families to get together and perhaps gone ahead and save them. Or I saw the Yad Ramah, perhaps the witches to go figure out spells to save themselves. But by going ahead instantaneously, breaking into their castle, having the men pick them up with it and killing them all on the same day, that would go ahead and ensure that none of that would happen. Casting spells and their families coming together to perhaps save them. So you want to be a riot that women are hung? No. They were hung for a reason. It was like Shah. It was blatant women being involved in this stuff. He wanted to go and said, if you're involved in this stuff, this is what's going to happen to you. So, and therefore, you can't bring me a raya. Because in addition, you're not supposed to go ahead and judge them on the same day, which he did do. So again, it was a Rasha and there's no raya from there. Very nice. Says the Gemara. Tan Rabbanan. So now we have Machloikis, fellas. We have Machloikis between Rebbe Eliezer and the Chachamim. Who is Taila? Who is Taila? And Rebbe Eliezer says everybody, anyone who got skila. And the Chacham say just Megadef or Mekal l'Shem and Avodah Zarah. There's two ways to darshan the Torah. We've said it multiple times, either derech klalu prat or derech riboy miyot. Usually we go with the following fellas. We have a klal, prat klal, then we have a riboy miyot riboy. The bottom line is if you darshan riboy miyot, you're going to be more inclusive than klalu prat. So the only the klal here is you hang them up. The prat is the one who cursed Hashem. So what's similar to one who benches Hashem in skila is avodah zarah, because both the person who's makal Hashem is being kaifa beikar, he's denying Hashem, and the one who's avodah zarah is denying Hashem. So the prat will be similar to one who is what kaifa beikar. But if someone who's makal Shabbos or someone who's over an avera of arayos, they're not kaifa beikar. So memela that would not be included in one through a Torah. Mashen came Rabbi Eliezer, he dashens the klal ribi miyot. So once it's ribi miyot, it's going to include anything, not only just someone who is makal Hashem and similar to avodah zarah, but even calling the skull. That's the Gemara. Says the Gemara. Tanabana. For whom is this Alisa? Yachol kol hamumas mumsin nitlan. I may think everyone who is killed is hung up. Tamad loyma ki kill less olakim. Right. Tali, tali. Mam mekalel zeh shebeskila. Af kol shebeskila. So what are we saying? We said the only one who's going to go ahead and get. I'm going off the screen for a second. The only one who goes ahead is going to go ahead and get skila is someone who's similar to what. The only one who's going to be hung up is someone who gets skila. So chenek won't get hung up, sreifa won't get hung up, and the herrig won't get hung up for various reasons. But again, the only one who gets hung up is the one who is similar to kilala, which is niskalim. Just like this makala what he is kaifa beikar, he's denying Hashem. Af kol shekafa beikar, so too anyone who denies Hashem. My comiftlaki. What's the source of machlekes? Why is Rabbi Eliezer more inclusive and Rabbi Eli and the Chachamim more exclusive? Says Gemara, Rabbanan Darshi Klolu Prati, Rabbi Eliezer Darshin Ribuy Miyut, and Rabbi Eliezer Darshin Ribuy Miyut. Now, here's the psukim in the Torah, fellas, are not in the same pasuk. Here's one pasuk. V'chi yiyeh b'ish chet mishpat maves. That's one pasuk. The next pasuk, like Salin of Lasay ala eitz, ki kavitzik marena, ki kilas ala kim taloi, like Satami esad maska. So the psukim are they're not exactly they're one after the other, but they're not in the same pasuk. They're not in the same pasuk. So let's see what happens over here. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer dashin ribu umitoi. Rabbanan Dashi Kol Prati. V'humas v'salisa is klal. Kikilas prat. Ihavi mekarve l'hadadi. And if they were next to each other, ein b'chala masha b'prat. Now, they're not in the same pasuk, fellas. The pasuk says v'humas v'salisa v'humas v'salisa. That's pasuk of Beis, and then it says kikilas elokim. That's pasuk of Gimel. So, fellas, they're not right next to each other. They're psukim away. So, guys, look at me for a second. If they're right after each other, aim bichlal elamashe beprat. The only thing that would be hung up is what? The only thing that would be hung up is Mekalo, is someone who benches Hashem. If it's in the same pasuk, again, we say Rabbi Shmuel every day, or we should say Rabbi Shmuel every day. Ein bechal mashe beprat. The klal is what? The klal is hanging. The prat is who gets hung? Kill Adam. But it doesn't say it. It says it over here. By distancing it away, we're going to make it a little more inclusive. What's the little more inclusive? Anything that's similar to someone who benches Hashem. Who is that? Someone who's Ovid Avodah Zarah, because they're both koife beikar. So the distance, going the distance a little bit away, is more inclusive. So now that's what the Gemara says. Rabbanan Dashi Kal Prate V'humas v'Salisa Klal Ki Kilas Prat Iavi Makarvi Ladodi. If they were one was right after next to each other, Nasim in the bottom of Mem Hey Amidbeis Aminon Ein Bachal Elamashe Beprat. You'll say the only thing that's in the klal is the prat. But Hani in Midi Achrin Eloi. Only what? Only Kilas Adam. Hashta Meraki Omed Aleph. Hashta Meraki Me'adadi. Now that you distance it by one pasuk, Ahani, it helps. L'ribuye Avodas Kechavim. Didomile. It happens to go ahead and include the Avodas Kechavim, the Damile B'chol Mili. The fact that you kaifa be'ikah. So it says the Chachamim, V'humas v'salisa. Who v'salisa? Who v'salisa? Kilas Adam. Someone who benches Hashem. And what? And Avodah Zarah. Those two. Rabbi Eliezer dasha ribu miut. However, Rabbi Eliezer, he dashes the way of ribu muta. V'humas v'salisa ribu. Ki kilas miut. So now, when it says v'humas v'salisa, you should kill and hang. Who are you hanging? Everyone who gets killed. Everyone gets killed. Ki kilas miut. Oh, only what? Only someone is who curses Hashem, who benches Hashem. Since it's ribui miyut, I'm only being mayit less. So I'll be mayit all niskalim with the exception of klala and avodas kechavim. But now Hashta de merachi mehadadi ahani l'ribuy shine skala. Okay, so guys, look at me. Let's do both according. Let's go. Okay, here. Let's do the Chachamim and then do Rebbe Eliezer. The Chachamim. Klalu prat. Only thing that would be in the cloud. The only thing that would be again. What would be the only again? The only thing that would be in the cloud would be someone who benches Hashem. That's the only thing that would be in the cloud. However, once you distance it away, it includes one more thing, something similar to the prat. What's the prat? Klala, Akilas Hashem, benching Hashem, avodah zarah, kaifa be'eka. That's the Chachamim. What about the rest in the Skolim? No. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer, Riboy, everything. Everything is in the parsha of, as long as you're getting skila, you're in the parsha. Miyut, okay, 1 second, not everything. Only thing, kill as Adam, and something similar to that. What's that? Avodah zarah. So now you have two. So in other words, at this point in time, when we had the Chachamim only had benching Hashem, at this point in time, Rabbi has both benching Hashem and Avodah zarah. Because he again, when Ribu Miyat, you're going to be more. Because Ribu is everything. Now that you distance it, guess back. All Niskalim. Once you distance it, you're all Niskalim. Once again, the distancing is going to accomplish something. So you went from only these two to everything. Like the Chachamim, you went from this one to two. Like the Rabbi Eliezer, you went from what? Two to everything. Therefore, they hold kol niskalim. Anyone who gets skila, what? Is going to go ahead and be hung after their skila. And according to the Chachamim, no, only similar to benching Hashem, which is what? Which is avodah zarah. Okay? So, we have a second machlokes. Women don't, according to the Chachamim, women don't get hung. According to Rabbi Eliezer, women get hung, albeit that not facing the people, they're facing the eights. Okay, so my time the Rabbanon, Amakra, V'salisa Oisai, and you should hang him, Oisa v'layisa, and she doesn't get hung. Rabbi Eliezer, Oisai b'lay ksusai, right? Him without his clothing, because you would have thought, fellas, that since he was right, you even though he was killed without clothing. Remember, everyone said that he dies without clothing, so he should die quickly, right? You might think that the covered for him, you put some clothing on. Kamash Malon, that he's still in other words, he's still suspended without clothing. Rabbanon, enochinami. The Rabbanon say enochinami. That so l'chayra, if he uses it for oisai, that without clothing, where does he know oisai v'lo? So ella amakra v'chia be'ish chet. When the pasuk says v'chia chet mishpat maves v'humas v'solisa oisai ela eitz. It says v'humas v'solisa ish v'lo isha. Who's v'solisa? Who are you going to suspend? Dafka man and not a woman. Rabbi Eliezer, who says you do suspend the woman. What does he do with the pasuk? Hai v'chiyeh be'ish my darish. Amrei Shlokish hahu lemuute ben saru morer. That comes to go ahead that you don't hang a ben saru morer. Because why? Right? Because it says ish, and a ben saru is not an ish; he's a kid. I've a tiny ben saru morer niskal the nitla. Ben saru morer gets hung, gets skila, and gets hung. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. So the chayra, you can't tell me the ish is to exclude a ben saru morer from being hung. According to Rabbi Eliezer, because you see Rabbi Eliezer says a ben saru mora does get hung. Elam Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, the rabbi ben saru mora. Do you know what it comes to include ben saru mora? That he gets hung. My timer. Ish ben. That's a miyut. You're excluding what? You're excluding a ben saru mora. Chet misha al chetoy nerag. Someone who gets killed for a chet. Yatsu ben saru mora shal shum sofo nerag. Why does Ben saru mora get killed, fellas? As we're going to see, not for what he did, but what he will do. So mainly you have two miyutim. What's our rule, guys? What's our rule? One miyut after another miyut comes to include. So therefore you hang him. Therefore you'll suspend him. Says the Gemara having miyut acha miyut, one miyut ish, the second miyut chet, right? Miyut acha miyut el rabbis. So Rabbi Eliezer say that you will suspend the Ben saru mora. Obviously the Chachamim disagree with that, as we'll see that when we get there. So the Chachamim hold that ish v'lo isha, and Rabbi Eliezer says you do suspend an isha, you do suspend it, albeit with the face facing the eights. uses it to include Ben Soromora as the first miyat of Shnei Miutim. Amal Rabbi Eliezer, Shimon ben Shetach Tala Nashim. Didn't Shimon ben Shetach go ahead and suspend women? You see that you do get suspended. So how can you say you don't suspend women? If Shimon ben Shetach killed 80 witches, he killed 80 witches, and he did suspend them. So Amr of Chisda says of Chisda, Loi Shanu, we did not say that you don't judge on the same day. Ela b'shtei misais, two separate misas, like Rashi said in the Mishnah, because you have to find bias for each one. So it's too much, it's an overload on the Dayanim. Avol b'misa achas, one misa, danin. So if they're both chayiv, the same misa, you would judge on the same day. All of them were chayiv skila, and you shouldn't have judged them on the same day because, as we saw in Taisvis, they're different averis. The Ka'amr laid the ain danin, that you don't judge them on the same day. I heard the same misa. So fellas, we're going to go ahead now and fine-tune the statement of Rav Chisda. It doesn't mean, it means two averis on the same day. If you want to learn Rav Chisda zin hachikama, itmar. Lo shanu, that Bezdin cannot judge two capital punishments on the same day. Ela b'misa achas ke'ein shtei misais. If it's one misa, but like two misas. V'hechi dami, can shtei averis, two averis. So now look at Taisus, guys. Shtei averis, u'maisa d'shim ben shetach, yesh balas ov, v'yedoni, v'yesh chay v'chever, u'shamech ha'shefais. In other words, good they had the same misa skila, but you can't judge them on the same day. Why? Because they're different. They're ke'ein shtei averis, because they're two different types of averis. Avav misa achas v'aveir achas danin. But if it's, let's say, people on Machal Shabbos, then you would judge on the same day, Shabbos, because they're both the same thing. Okay? Masir Ravada Barava, ain't done a shnayim b'yom echad. You can't judge what? You can't judge two b'yom echad on the same day. V'afilu b'noyef and efes. Now, l'chayra noyef and efes, they're both chayiv. They're both chayiv chenek. They're both chayiv chenek. So l'chayra, you could judge them on the same day. Says Gemara Tigmar of Chisda the Baskayenu Bayala. So you might remember from your Makkas days, Baskayin gets Streifa and a Bayala gets Chenek. So in other words, those Vafil, even that you can't judge on the same day. Why? Because it's two separate misas. It's one Aveira but two separate misas. So that's what we meant. You have a kasha. You say, look, Noyer Ve'efes, the kasha is it's the same misa, the same Aveira, and you can't judge it on the same day? And the answer is, it's not the same Aveira. It's the same Aveira. It's not the same Misa. Therefore, you can't judge it on the... A Bas Kayin, and you had Zaymimim, and then the Zaymimim. They made the Zaymimim to Zaymimim. So they would also get Chenek, because they get the Misa of the boil, not the Misa of her. Tanya Rav Lesmi Yaakov Aimer, Shamati shebezdin makin v'oinshin shalei min ha-Torah. I heard Bezdin can makin. They could go ahead and hit. They can give malchus. Even they weren't even averim in a Torah. V'loy avar al divrei Torah, right? Even if they're not even divrei Torah, only the words of the chachamim. K'dei lasa siyag l'Torah. U'maisa be'echad sherochav al sus b'Shabbos. Now, why are you not allowed to ride a horse on Shabbos? Because you're going to go ahead and cut a branch to go ahead and hit the horse, which is the Rabbanan. Says the Gemara. B'mei Yevonim. Now the Yevonim, it was the shasa of they were making it very hard for us to keep Shabbos, and people were being very lax in it. And this person was lax in it. And what did they do? They viu lebezdin the sakluhu. They brought this guy to Bezdin. You know what they did? They gave him skila. Not because he was way for skila. It was necessary for the time. Guys, this is the support for Shimon ben Shetach. Not that you could have judged them all the time and done it, but if the time calls for it, the Chacham have the power to do something. He was boiled his wife publicly underneath a tree. And they gave him malchus. So if the time was the pits in Arayos, the immorality. Many years ago, I took a teacher training course, 1983. That's how I ended up in Prospect Park. There was a person, he taught us certain subject matters. His name was Rav Hirsch Goldrum, Zechet Tzadik Levracha. Now, no one knows who he is, but if you look in the early Art Scroll editions, guys, he was the general editor of Art Scroll. That means anything that went up through Art Scroll had to go through Hirsch Goldworm. He died in his 40s. Anything that went through Art Scroll had to go through Hirsch Goldworm. I remember him vividly. A chassid with tzitzis over his shirt and a hat, sitting without a sefer, quoting verbatim just everything. The guy he was an Oren V'Tumim. Guy was mamish an Oren V'Tumim. And I don't remember from where he said it, but he said it b'shem the Naiv Yehuda. Naiv Yehuda guys lived in this. It was in the 1700s. They brought someone to Bezdin, and he cut off his hand. Not because of Roy Lakach, it doesn't exist in the Jewish, right? This guy was a thief. He said the Naiv Yehuda cut off his hand. So again, Naiv Yehuda, you could do such a thing. But again, Bezdin is empowered. If it calls for the time, if things are up, people are doing things, and society is lax as a result in certain averis to support it. That's what happened. Says the Mishnah. Again, Vaita explaining now how did they do Tliya? Leisalin, how did they do Leisalin? They would go ahead and after Skila, they would put the person up. Now everyone agrees, let's say, the Mekalel, you get up there. Kate said Silin, I say, Mishakin es ha-koira ba'aretz, they would stick the koira, the beam, into the ground, v'o eitz yaitza, and an eitz would come out. Guys, like this. Here's your beam, and here's your eitz, like an inverted L. Picture it as an inverted L, right? And a beam would be coming out from the top of it. Umakif shtei yadav zu al zu. They put one hand one on top of the other. So the hands would be like this, and picture these hands with the beam underneath it, and the person would go ahead on and be hung that way. So the beam would be there. Again, don't mistakenly think this is crucifixion. This is not crucifixion at all. This is a beam coming out and the guy's hands being there, and it's going to be there for the littlest amount of time. You can't imagine how little amount of time it's going to be there, as we'll see. So the beam would come out, the hands would be crossed on top of the beam. Rabbi Yossi said they didn't stick it in the ground. They would lean it against the wall, and they would suspend the person from the beam, like the butchers used to do. It seems that, again, since this beam is not in the ground with any support, it's against the wall, they would have to hang him a certain way. I saw some shot, they hung him by ropes, or they made sure that his body wouldn't fall. Again, like Rabbi Yossi, you're taking the beam, you're inclining it, here's the wall, you're inclining the beam against the wall, because he holds you can't stick it in the ground. So there was they did something else to make sure that he be supported on that eitz coming out. So there's no machlokes about the eitz. The machlokes is whether you stick it in the ground or not. Like the chachamim, you stick it in the ground. Like Rabbi Yossi, you don't stick it in the ground. That's the machlokes, and we'll see the reason in the Gemara. Umatin re'samiyad, and you'd undo it immediately. Immediately. In other words, the guy was there seconds, not minutes, seconds. You would undo it. He'd be hung, and immediately it would be undone. Because see Lashon of the Brisa. As one guy is tying, the other guy is untying. Vim if you leave him up there, or you leave him out overnight, over love b'leisase. Shnemar leisulin levlasei ala eitz. Ki kavoi sikbarenu. Ki kilas elakim toli. Kleimar. If they mazet toli, you know the whole reason he's suspended? They sheberech as Hashem, because he benched Hashem. V'nimtza Shem Shemayim Eschalel, and as a result, Shem Shemayim is Eschalel, and you go ahead and you bury him. You can't leave him out overnight. You have to bury him right away. This is the source for Jewish burial right away, fellas. This is not only people who kill, this any Jew. Amar Reb Meir, b'shasha adam mitztayer shechina ma'lashon aimeres. When a person's in tsar, what does the Shekhinah say? Kalani meroishi, kalani mizraye. My hands are light. My head is light, and my hands are light. Now, what he means is they're heavy. If you look at Rashi says 4 lines up. Kalani Mraishi, Kimosha Adam Sheyagia V'Oyev, if a person is tired and famatit, Aimid Roishi covered alai. My head is heavy on me. Zeroya covered alai. V'Hainu kilolas. The word kilolas, let's break it up in two words. Kal less. Kilolas. Kal less. There is not light. Kal less. It's not light. Elamah, but it's heavy. Ani, any kal. I'm not kal. So that's what the Kadosh Baruch Hu says when a rush is hung. In Kain Amakim Mitzstar al Damat Shel Rishoyim, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mitzstar on the Rasha, Shenishbach, that who spilled blood, Kach L'Kal V'Chomer al Damat Shel Tzadikim, that the blood of the Rasha is spilled, not that he spilled blood, that his blood is spilled, certainly the blood of the Tzaddik that is spilled, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is laments. Anyone who leaves out any mace, fellas. Now, this is not only B'zubal Vad, not only the person who was killed, but anyone who dies naturally. If you leave out the body, you're over in Leisolin. But you could, you could leave it out. Let's say you left out the body for the purpose of the covet of the individual, then what? Then you're not over it. I looked it up in Shin Nun Zayin in Yeridea, before Shalacha, you could go ahead and leave a body out. Let's cover. That's why we do leave a body out. Let's say if children have to come from a distance, or it's going to be more covered to the individual. We'll go ahead and leave the body out.
Leif,
yeah.
Who's over this Avera? Who's Chiyuv is it?
What again? If it's I think the children who make sure the Chevra Kadisha take care of it, right? It's on the children who have to do it. Of the Chevra Kadisha, if Chevra Kadisha is, that's their job. If they leave it out, in Yerushalayim, they don't leave a body overnight. Very seldom. I did watch a body. I did watch a body, and he was an Adam Gadol, and they slept it for the next day. But I watched this body. It was the most scariest thing in my life. It wasn't in a drawer. It was on a floor in the coldest night of Yerushalayim that I was ever at. I was a bachar, and in the middle of the night, like these few guys come in and start. They were saying Tehillim by heart, and they were drinking arak. It was the craziest night. It was like a wild night. It was like they were getting drunk by dead bodies. It was weird. It was very weird. Zalman and I were there. We still can't believe we did it. We took the midnight shift, the 2 to 4 shift. Anyway, it's mamish Heshi tales from the crypt. Anyway, says the Gemara Vaita. So again, so this is us. Now this is now getting back to the person killed. They didn't go ahead and bury him in the kever of his father. There were two separate cemeteries made for Bezdin. The ones who received the decapitation and strangulation. The those who received skila, and those who got streifa. So those are, you break up the two kalas and the two chamuris, right? The Gemara is going to ask, why don't we have 4? Nisakal basar, when the body decomposes, they would gather that samais. They would go bring it to the family crypt. And the relatives, the kroivim, I said kroivim, the kroivim would come. They would come and they would ask, not ask mechila, they would ask the edim and the dayanim, how you doing, as if to say, kloimar she'ein b'li beinu alechem. You did Amid Beis. You did what you had to do. In other words, he did the Aveira. He was asked, again, in order to kill the guy, he had to say to him, do you know if you do this, you're going to die? And he says, yep, and Afal Pikain. He killed himself, right? So again, the family, they can't hold any grudges. We want to make sure they don't hold any grudges. They would go to the Dayanim and the Eidim and say, Mehabnish Kaintainis.
How is there bones if they buried him right away? What does that mean, there were bones?
But they would wait until they decompose. And once they decompose, they would go take the bones and transport it back to the family crypt.
It takes a very long time for
not telling you. It's just telling you that that's not a permanent cemetery. That's not a permanent cemetery, and that in other words, they would be zoicha to kivrei avos. They would not remain there. There was none avelis, fellas. You didn't for a Russia who got skila, who's mevarich the Shem or any of avodah zara, according to the Chachamim and according to there was no avelus. Aval oinanin, there would be a din of aninus, shein aninus ela believe. In other words, aninus is believe, and you don't do something. I'm a little kash. I'm not exactly sure, fellas. A person who's an oinin can't eat kachim or ma'isa can't eat ma'isa sheni, right? They can't eat any ma'isa. In the video, we say so l'chayre, there is a physical manifestation of it. In other words, if you want to go ahead and say you don't do something avelis, I guess if they're eating it, the person doesn't know that necessarily they're not eating that. Ma'isa sheni looks the same because it could be that's the teretz to the kasha. In other words, you can't eat ma'isa sheni. So what? Yeah, you have a bread made from ma'isa sheni. It's good. It looks like bread. It's the fact that you're not eating that. It's not outright. So I answered my kasha. Okay, right. Tan Rabbanan. Ilu nemachet v'solisa. If it would have said first lashon, again, we can't say this pasuk enough. The pasuk says, "V'chiyah beish chet mishpat maves v'chumas." You kill him v'solisa. Then you suspend him. So says the Gemara, "Ilu nemachet v'solisa," and then not v'chumas. If he would have said he does the chet and then you hang him up, you hang him up and then kill him. The malchus, what they would do, they would hang the guy up, they'd crucify him, and then they'd kill him afterwards, right? But again, it doesn't say that. It says, when do we hang him up? After v'humas v'salisa. Talmud Loimar, v'humas, first you kill him, v'salisa. Mamita maisai, v'yakach toilim maisai. First kill him, and then suspend him. Okay, tzad, what would you do? Mashin maisai at samach l'shkia sachama. You'd wait the whole day for the Gemar Din, close to Shkia. For Goyim Mesdinoi, then you'd have a Gemar Din for Misa, and you would not wait at all. Umamita Maisai, you would kill him. V'yakach toilim Maisai, then you would go ahead, and hang him. Guys, listen to this lashon. Echad koishev, echad matir. One person would be tying, and one person would be untying. That's how long you kept them up there. That's how long you kept them up there, right? Now it gives us a tremendous understanding. We had in the Gemara where the Givonim, they kept out for months, many months. They had the descendants of Shaul hanging out there. When we saw that the Hirash Shah, because of the famine that was in the land, it gives us an understanding of how wide that was, how distant it was from the norm. That's what they did. Tanrabanan. The pasuk says eights again. It says v'salisa isai ala eights. You hang him on the eights. Shemeyani bein betalish bein mechuber. When I speak about eights, wood, it could be detached wood, or it could be still a tree that's in the ground. Talmud Loimar ki kavar. So the pasuk says, Leisolin of Lasel eights ki kavoi sikbarenu. Now, what do we darshan, fellas? We're going to bury that tree. We're going to bury the tree. Why are we going to bury the tree? That you shouldn't say, oh, that's the tree that he was hung on. So we're going to bury it. So Mimela, it can't be connected to the ground, because then you're going to have a different action in between the Talia and the Kfura. Mishain Mechusa el Kfura. It's only missing being what? Stuck in buried. Yatzah, if it was what? If it was a real tree, Shemechusa Ketzitza, you first have to cut it off. Ukfura and bury it. So that's what do the Chum say, fellas? What do? You take the wood, the no'atz bikarka, and you stup it into the ground. And the act of taking it out of the ground, taking it, or as we say in Yiddish, unstuppen. If you're going to unstup, that's not considered an act of what? It's not an act. It's not an act of ketzitza. So memela, we know that it has to be Telusha. It has to be a disattached tree just stuck in the ground rather than a tree that's still growing from the ground, because then you would have an action in between. This brings to mind, remember a get. You can't write a get on a tree. Why? Because v'chasav v'nasan. It can't be v'chasav v'katzatz v'nasan. Hesha, you have a question?
So the case of the 86, the Shimon and Shekel with the 86, they made 86 gallows.
It was
86,
80. It was 80, right?
80. So they made 80 trees.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Why not?
I don't know. It's it's a lot of I don't know. It just sounds like a lot.
Well, it could be. I'm thinking it could be that they killed it and they put on the tree one after the other, after the other, after the other. Why does it have to be a unique tree to them? Well, it says it could be to bury. It could be it says they have to bury. It's a good question, but it's really a question in my dahava hava. It's no nafkamina. Just like it's like Newsweek. It's like Jeopardy. Okay, weiter. Rabbi Yossi Aimer, Mi she'ena mechuser el kfura, yotze zeh shemechuser talisha ukfura. He holds the act of fellas of unshtupping is an act. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi says it has to be inclined against the wall. It can't be in the ground. Rabbanan talisha lav klumi. The act of talisha, taking it out of the ground, is nothing. Klaimar b'fnei mazeh toli b'fnei shebirchas Hashem. Tanya, Reb Meir, mashlei mashal, l'ma David doimer, l'shnei achem tumim. You got two twin brothers. Be'er. Achas, Be'er Achas. Echad minuye melech. One of the brothers, they made the king. The echad yoitzel l'stoyis. And one of them went out to be a robber. Siva melech, the melech commanded on his brother, b'toluhu, and they hung him up after they killed him. Kolaroyisai, anyone who would look at him, Omer, hamelech taloi, the melech is hung up. Siva hamelech wariduhu. The melech therefore commanded to take him down. What's the mashal? Look at Rashi. L'shnei tu'umim, af adam asay b'dekyuv shel makayim. Even persons made in the image of Hashem. In other words, so why do we just put him up and take him down? Because you shouldn't say there's Hashem hanging. Again, I always speak out we know Hashem is incorporeal. Hashem has no goof, he has no body. It's one of the beliefs, he doesn't have anything. We speak metaphorically about Etzba Elikim, Yad Hashem, Ezroi Netuya. These are all terms, but Hashem has no body. So why does it mean that Adam was created b'tselem Elikim? Why does it mean Adam was created b'tselem Elikim? So there's the Mizrahi on Rashi says a pshat that when Hashem appears to Nevi'im, he appears as an image. He doesn't appear as an elephant. He doesn't appear as an aardvark. He appears as a human being. The fact that Hashem chooses to appear to a Basav Adam as a human being gives the chashivas to the yuknain of Shel Adam. So therefore, Memela, that here's a person who's in the image that Hashem chooses to appear to Basav Adam, and he's hanging out there. So immediately we take him down. Immediately we take him down. That's the mashal. Reb Meir. Now, Reb Meir said, Kilalani Hashem. My mashma, Rabaya, Kimanda Amar, Kales. Kilalas, you're saying that what? You're saying that it's not kal, but it's heavy. Amalei Rava and Cain, if the kavana of Kilalani is Eini Kal, Kaved Alai Roishi, you should say my head is heavy. Kaved Alai is Roi. Why are you boile? Why are you speaking in antonyms, right? You're speaking in an antonym. If you want to say you're heavy, don't say I'm not light. If you want to say you're heavy, don't say I'm not light. Say you're heavy. So therefore, Rava disagrees with that bias. Amalei Rava. So Rava says, Elo Amar Rava, Kimanda Amar, Kil Li Alma. The world is light to me. Kala Olam, carry me. May Roiv Shani Kavi. In other words, I don't know. I guess Rav is a little more esoteric. Rav's saying, what does Kilani mean? That it's too light for me, the world, to carry me. Okay, I'm not exactly sure. Now, Haimi Boile Legufei, Fred the Gemara, how could the Kilas Adam, you need to tell me Legufei. You need to tell me like we saw the Shita of what we saw the Shita of you have to hang him up. Kilas, how can you use it to tell me that you say Kilas this? When you needed to tell me that what only a person who gets skila is hung, kill us on them, right? Who do you? Each one, we had the Chachamim Rebbe Eliezer, so we needed it for that. How could you use it for this din? Since we needed it for that, how could we use it for this din? Okay, so on that the Gemara answers, in Cain name Miklal, my kilalas, ve'makulu lahachiu. Maybe it only comes to teach me kilalani. The asa and kain name it kilas. My kilalas, the double lamid. It's a shami. No, tarti here both. You hear the that the world is light to me, and you also hear the fact that only a person gets skila is hung. Bloizu bulvad. Rabbi Yochanan mishum Shimon Yechoy minayin lemalin es mesay sha'ov b'loisase. How do a person leaves out a mace overnight? Person leaves out a mace overnight. How do you know he's over in loisase? Tamad leimar ki kavay sik berenu, because it says you should bury him. Mrs. Saseh to bury him. Mikam lemalin es mesay sha'ov b'loisase. That if you leave your mace out, you're over in loisase. It can be Rabbi Yochanan mishum Shimon Yechoy remes lekfur min atayra. What's the remes to burial min atayra? Minayin tamad leimar ki kavay sik berenu. Bury, you should bury. Mikan rem is the kavur min atayra. Amle Shva Malka said, this king of Persia, the Rav Chama, kavuras min atayra minayin. How do you know from your Torah there's an Indian of kavura? So Ishtik, Rav Chama was quiet. He didn't answer Shva Malka. Amr Rav Acha Yaakov, Imser Alma Biyode de Tapshoy. Right, is the world given over to a tippish, a fool? The boy Leila Mema Rav Chama should have told him, Ki cover the la'avid lay arid, ki cover. He should have told like he covered from the pasuk of what he covered sik berenu. Why did Rav Chama not give that pasuk? So now we're going to go through why he didn't. So the avid lay arin. If he would have said ki cover, Shava Malka would have said that means just that you have to put him in a box. So then you could have said tik berenu, which is mashma you have to bury him. Like mashmalei to a guy. He's not going to covet the double lashon. He's not going to go ahead and darshan things. So therefore, the reason why Rav Chama didn't tell him the pasuk he covet sik berenu is it wouldn't suffice to know kfura mamish. It could be in a box. The Neymar made the ikbert tzadike. After all, the abbos were going ahead and buried in the Maris Machpelah. So why would not that be a good raya? Why didn't Rav Chama say that? So it's minhag ba'alma, right? They would say it's a minig ba'alma. No, it's not. It's not necessarily you have to do it, but that was the minig. No, he wants to know where the source for kavura is, because the fact that they buried the others maybe not a source. Because why it's kavura? The fact that it says kikava sik berenu maybe it means a box. So then they said, why didn't Rav Chama tell Shava Malka Hakadosh Baruch Hu Moshe? Hashem buried Moshe, so that's a source for burial in the Torah. Hashem buried Moshe, and that Gemara says. The reason he did that is he shouldn't go ahead and change from the minig. He shouldn't go ahead and change from the minig. That's why he shouldn't change from the minig. So in other words, all the Gemara is saying is why didn't Rav Chama go ahead and answer Shvar Malka is because it wouldn't have been a good answer. If you would have said kisikbar, you said a box. If you would have said the avos, says it's a minig. If you said Hashem to Moshe, you don't want to change from the minig. Okay, so now we know that Yeravam ben Nevat was a Russian Marusha. We're going to have to come on chelik whether he had a chelik or not, and he had a son, Achia, his Avia or Achia. What's his son's name? Avia. His son Avia did a really good thing, fellas. But what Yeravam ben Nevat did is he put barriers up that the people could be oil regel. Because if they be oil regel, they would see the Malchus Beis David sitting in the Azara. Because Ein Yeshiv Azara El Malchus Beis David Bilvad. And they realized that he's the real king. So Yeravam, who split and had the 10 Shvatim in the north, he didn't let people go. He set up Pardisia, centuries. His son, Avia, took down these centuries. In that schus, he was the only one of the sons that was Lechet Kfura. So this is the pasuk describing that. Right? This is the pasuk. So now the Gemara wants to bring a raya from this pasuk that wants to bring a raya from this pasuk that you bury, right? He wants to bring a raya from this pasuk that you bury. So what does the pasuk say? It says, "V'saftu loy kol Yisrael," that the nevuah Achia Shiloni had a nevuah regarding Avia, the son of Yeravam. V'saftu loy kol Yisrael v'kavru esai. So you see, there was kfura. Says the Gemara, the loy lishneim min haga, the same teretz that you should be mishana from the minig. Now it says that the men of Anasais who went ahead and treated Yirmiyah terribly, they didn't get a burial. La yismdu lo yikavru L'doimim al pnei adama yiyu. So you see, this is a place for kavura when they didn't bury them, meaning you should bury. Says Gemara, delishlim haga. For these Rishoyim of Anasois, they were mishana from the minig. The bottom line is, this is the reason why Chama did not give what a reason, an answer to Shvamalka, because it's not conclusive. Because it's not conclusive. Fed Gemara Kasha. Iboilahu. Kfura. What's the reason for kfura? Mishum bizyoinahu is because of it's a bizayin. Or mishum kaparahu. Or what? Or it's what? Or it's a kapara. Is it bizayin? Or is it because what? It's for a kapara. What's the reason for kfura? Why do we go ahead and bury someone? In other words, what's the bizayin? That to see a body out in this state is a tremendous bizayin. Mishum kaparahu. Or what is the mishum kapara? That the person should go kimayim kiyaf rata v'lafa tashuv. L'may nafkamina. The Amar loy beinin l'kfurei lahu garve. He says, I don't want to be buried. He wants to be stay above ground. He doesn't want to be buried. Mishum bizyoinahu lav kol kamina. He doesn't have that power because it's a bizayin for the family that he should be decomposing barabim. V'yamim mishum kaparuhu ha'amar loy beinin kapara. He says, I don't need a kapara. What's the din? So the shayla is als bizayin or als what his kapara. If he says I don't want it, so als kapara he would have that power. Als bizayin he would not have that power. Toshma mid the ikbur tzadike, when they buried it tzadikim, they buried right. The amit mishum kapara tzadikim kapara tzricha. They don't need a kapara, right? They don't need a kapara, so it must be als bizayin. Says they do need a kapara. Dechsiv adam in tzadik bar tzishya esetav leyachta. There's no one said tzadik leytav leyachta. Tashma, it says now we bring in the same psukim by Aviyah, the son of Yeravam, v'siftu loy kol Yisrael v'kavro Isai, and v'i'amit ki hechid the havile kapara hanachnami likbru ki hechid the havile kapara. If the reason why that is kapara, then everyone should be buried at kapara. The only one who got buried, guys, is Achia, is Aviyah, excuse me, Aviyah. And if you're telling me kfur is because of kapara, then the mishpacha of Yeravam, right, should have got a kapara. They should get buried. Says my hide tzaddik to have a kapara. Hanachlo have a kapara. This Aviyah who was a tzaddik because he took down the guards, he gets a kapara. But those they don't get a kapara. Tashma from the men of Anasais by Yirmiyah. Lo yispadu lo yikavru. The lo to have a kapara. So what do you see? That not to be hesped, not to get a kapara. And if the reason is kapara, why shouldn't they get buried to get the kapara? So it must be bizayin. So no, Adarabba. The reason we don't bury them, they shouldn't get a kapara. Okay, the next shaila goes on for the next plot, so we'll stop over here.